Hey tribe, how you doing? It's Ginny here, taking you through another day of my walk through the forest. I wanted to first off acknowledge all of you for the messages and the comments to my Let It Go video yesterday, which was so spontaneous, and it's wonderful to see that it connected with so many with you. I think the number one message that I got from your feedback was that you get intellectually that there's something that you need to let go, but it's just so hard, or you just don't know how to do it. And so what I'm dedicated to doing over the next couple of videos is sharing some strategies and techniques that have worked for me. Now, I always start off by saying I am not your guru, baby, but I think what is so beautiful about having a tribe in this space is that we can share our experiences, we can share our stories, and by doing that, we can exchange energy, whether that's information, support, inspiration, so that we can see that there's another possibility for our lives, and that's my intention. So I want to start off this video with introducing you to two little girls. The first little girl, born highly sensitive. Oh, this poor little vulnerable thing came into the world, and she absorbed everyone's pain. She absorbed sadness and hurt and fear and frustration and anger, and she felt lonely much of her life and scared much of her life. And she used to actually take her stuffies and hide under the dining room table, create these little forts, and she would escape into her imagination just to find a safe place and create these worlds where she was safe. And fear ruled much of her life, and was the source of much regret in her life. She made choices based on security and safety as opposed to love and joy and desire, and it impacted her entire life. And so she often felt paralyzed by fear. She lived her life as a people pleaser because she was more concerned about how other people felt than her own feelings. And she was also a perfectionist because what she really wanted to do was to make sure that everything was just right so she could show up in the world and be loved and be safe. Now, there's another little girl I want to tell you about. She actually was also a highly sensitive child. What was interesting about her, though, was that although she absorbed all the same kind of fear and hurt and pain and anger in her life, what she did is she also grabbed her stuffies and would hide under the dining room table, but she created these imaginary worlds that actually built her resilience within her. She had a sense of confidence and courage in herself that no matter what was going on outside of her world and her environment, she was able to take herself to a place where she felt okay, where she felt safe. She was able to transport herself into a world through her thoughts and imagination, into a place of possibility, into a place that made everything okay. And this girl grew up, and although she was confronted with a lot of the fear and abandonment issues from her childhood, what it did was it really fostered and built her resilience muscle. And so her sensitivity, the absorption of all of these feelings actually deepened her ability to be compassionate and empathetic. And so she had these really cool, authentic connections with people, and that also fostered a sense of confidence and encouragement in her, and it impacted the work that she did and how she showed up in the world, and it gave her confidence to take risks even when things were very scary. And although she made a lot of mistakes and she made a lot of choices based in fear, she also was able to take a lot of risks and be courageous because, like that little girl, she remembered that she could create in her mind's eye a space that was safe and a space that was okay, and she could construct that in her mind and bring it into her reality. And so if you haven't picked up already, both of these little girls are actually the same little girl, and both of these little girls are actually me. And for the first 30 odd years of my life, I told myself that story about the scared little girl who needed safety and security, who was adverse to risk, who couldn't be spontaneous, who just made all her decisions based on how she could be safe. And once I recognized in my mid-30s that I was the author of the story, and the story that I was telling myself was disempowering me. It was keeping me tethered to a vulnerable, sad, scared little girl, and that I could rewrite that same story and it would be just as truthful, but I could rewrite it from the perspective of a child who used that experience to create strong connections with other people, to create a space of resilience and confidence and courage within herself. And both of those stories are equally true. But where I placed the energy, whichever story I repeated over and over in my mind, was the one that was going to impact my life the most. Because here's the deal. The stories that we tell ourselves are the beliefs that we have. And these beliefs are like grooves in our brain. We actually call them neural pathways. So every time we tell ourselves a story about the past, about letting go, about regret, about who we are, about how we show up in the world, we're reinforcing that neural pathway, that groove. We're making it deeper and deeper. I live on a corner house, and at the edge of the grass of the corner, there is a groove in the grass where the kids cross through my grass, and they've created this little groove in the grass because of how they repeatedly cross over this space. And that's what we do when we tell ourselves that same story over and over, is we're creating this deep groove in our brain, in our subconscious mind. And we live from that place. It creates a belief system. We call these things habits, because whatever we believe impacts our actions. So if I think that I'm a scared, vulnerable child, that's going to impact the actions that I take. It's going to make me make very careful choices. It's going to make sure that I stay a people pleaser. And these actions are going to impact the results that I get, obviously. And the results that I get are going to reinforce the belief. And I look back and I look at my results and I go, see, Gina, see, you're not a risk taker. You are a scaredy cat. Look at what you did. And it's just this vicious cycle over and over again. However, take two. If I could tell myself the story of myself, the second story, about a little girl who, although very highly sensitive and very afraid and very lonely, actually empowered herself to use her mind to create new stories, strategies, tools, authentic connections, confidence in herself, then my story is completely different. And if the groove in my brain, the belief system that I reinforce over and over, if that starts to change, that starts to impact the actions that I take. I start to become bolder in my decisions and my actions. I start to take risks. I start to have more confidence. That's going to directly impact my results. And if my results start to change, that's going to reinforce this new belief that, hey, maybe I am courageous. Hey, maybe I can do things differently. Maybe I am resilient, and no matter what happens out there, I will ultimately figure it out, because I always have. And so just by changing my story and my belief system, now this vicious cycle has become a cycle of empowerment, where I am reinforcing this new belief about myself. I know you've all heard of Roger Bannister, who was the first to run the 4-minute mile. You know, before him, it was thought impossible for any human being to run a 4-minute mile. And Roger Bannister himself couldn't do it. So what did he do? He didn't practice more. He practiced perfection in his mind first. He saw the clock and he saw himself running across that finish line in under 4 minutes. And then he achieved it. And once he achieved it, within the next 2 years, 37 people around the world achieved it. Now thousands of people have achieved it, because they've shifted the belief, that neural pathway about what's true. And so we understand the power of the mind and the power of the story that we tell ourselves. So if we're telling ourselves that we can't let go of something, that it's too hard, that we've made a mistake, that we don't have enough confidence or strength, that it was a missed opportunity, that it's going to be too difficult moving forward, whatever story we tell is going to be true for us. But can you just begin in the beginning by telling another story? Just choose a different story to tell. And maybe you won't believe it at first, but the power of repetition is just like the groove in the grass outside of my house. If you tell yourself that story over and over and over again, you're going to create a new neural pathway in your brain. And the energy flows where there's least resistance, right? So what you think about, the geese are affirming me here, what you think about over and over and over again, that's where the energy is going to flow. That's why what you think about, you bring about, right? That's where all these words come from, these sayings come from. So I want you to start to think about a new story for yourself about letting go. a new story for yourself about the possibility of what it's going to look like on the other side of letting go. Maybe you need to write out a script first for yourself. Some people, it's hard to think about it. You could write it out, you could think about it, you can visualize it, and in upcoming videos, I'll give you some strategies and techniques around that. But let's start in this space of recognizing that we could tell our story a million different ways. Is the story that you're telling empowering you, or is it keeping you tethered to the past? Is it keeping you tethered in this space of, I can't let go? So let's start there. Let me know how you do with this. Thank you for taking this beautiful walk with me. And look at that, the sun just came out. It's a sign. Love you guys. Bye.